I don't know.
Say it with me. I don't know.
Good God, it is liberating. I am a towering mountain of ignorance. I don't know. We're taught to believe that everything has a reason. And so we observe the world, we see what happened, and then we define the thing that happened as the reason the thing happened. But I think a lot of the time we end up mixing up thinking something with knowing something. This is why it can be so impossible to talk about certain topics with certain people. They've tied those suppositions to themselves so tightly with knots of narrative and constructed reality and values that there's just no untying it. And maybe unsurprisingly, in those situations, the best course of action is just to be friends. Maybe even ask them about that thing that they've created, because to them, it's immensely valuable. The world as we perceive it, as we've built it inside of ourselves, is a lie that we tell to ourselves, not out of deception, but out of necessity. We have no other choice. We simply cannot understand the world as it is, and so we construct. But sometimes I just have to tell myself the thing that is definitely true, the truest thing I can say, which is that I don't know.
Never know.
This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley.
In this dedication of a nation, we humbly ask the blessing of God. May He protect each and every one of us. May He guide me in the days to come.
We saw that the main problem is that there aren't enough incentives to get people to tell the truth, and there aren't enough incentives for people to not lie. And so we decided to use the power of crowdsourcing. So getting lots of ordinary people to take the pro-truth pledge in order to monitor and evaluate public figures who take the pledge, and then provide incentives for public figures to take the pledge because they'll want exposure to the audience that we build up of ordinary citizens who care about the truth. And they want the credibility of being known by this audience as being truth-oriented.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 152 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Today, Bob and I interview Gleb Tsipursky. He's an assistant professor in the history department at Ohio State. He earned a bachelor's degree from NYU, a master's from Harvard, and a PhD from UNC Chapel Hill. He specializes in behavioral science and is keen on how authoritarian regimes take over countries. He was raised in a Jewish household in Russia till he was 10, but never personally adopted Judaism and is today non-religious. As a part of the Rational Politics Project, Gleb co-founded the ProTruthPledge.org and IntentionalInsights.org. A current tragedy of the commons we're all experiencing today is our eroding confidence in differentiating truth from lies. Gleb is inviting everyone to take the Pro-Truth Pledge. It provides a tool that motivates all who take it to share accurate information and avoid sharing misinformation. As you've probably figured out, this episode is highly political, and if you're a Trump supporter, this is not going to be a fun ride for you. Gleb paints a much scarier picture of things than I previously assessed. Up until this conversation, I had deemed Trump an idiot and appealing to idiots. Gleb says otherwise. Gleb even says that Trump is emotionally intelligent, that he knows exactly what he's doing, and he knows what to say and what persona to present in order to get elected and to influence people. This is a game changer. Now keep in mind, Gleb is a Russian immigrant. He has a PhD in history with an emphasis on behavioral science. This is not a conspiracy theorist. This isn't a talking head punting shit out of his ass. This is research-based observations, first-hand accounts, and historical patterns and examples from other countries and eras. I know this is a bit doomsday-ish, but Chris Hedges concurs with Gleb's perspective as voiced in a recent article titled The End of the Republic. The following is an excerpt from that piece. Quote, Trump and our decaying empire have ominous historical precedents. If the deep state replaces Trump, whose ineptitude and imbecility are embarrassing to the empire, that action will not restore our democracy any more than replacing Commodus restored democracy in Rome. Our republic is dead. Societies that once were open and had democratic traditions are easy prey for the enemies of democracy. These demagogues pay deference to the patriotic ideals, rituals, practices, and forms of the old democratic political system while dismantling it. When the Roman Emperor Augustus, he referred to himself as the first citizen, neutered the republic, he was careful to maintain the form of the old republic. Lenin and the Bolsheviks did the same when they seized and crushed the autonomous Soviets. Even the Nazis and the Stalinists insisted they ruled democratic states. Thomas Paine wrote that despotic government is a fungus that grows out of a corrupt civil society. This is what happened to these older democracies. It is what happened to us. After this conversation with Gleb, Bob and I both took the Pro-Truth Pledge. I hope you benefit from our talk with Gleb Tsipursky. We taped this conversation on April 18th, 2017. We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world is a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast or leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, you can support us monetarily in two easy ways. You can pledge $1 per episode or more through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast. Or you can leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. The smallest contribution is greatly appreciated. Our opening monologue is an excerpt from a YouTube by Hank Green titled Towering Mountain of Ignorance. The music behind it is Never Know by Jack Johnson. The segue music on this episode was created by the Barry Orchestra, found at barryorchestra.bandcamp.com. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is.
Hello.
Hello, Gleb.
Gleb.
Okay, good. I can hear you all.
Yes, I can hear you too. Well, good.
Excellent.
And you're up in Massachusetts? Is that where we find you?
No, in Columbus.
Oh, in Columbus, Ohio. That's right. That's right. At Ohio State.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
Columbus, Ohio.
So what are you a professor of?
In the history of behavioral science. So behavioral science combines psychology, behavioral economics, cognitive neuroscience, philosophy, sociology, anthropology, and other disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
And the history part of it means I apply it to historical and contemporary settings. So this allows me to take frameworks from any of the disciplines that I mentioned and apply them to specific contexts. So I can have a very eclectic toolkit that I can draw from depending on the needs of each context.
Sure. Excellent. Very good.
So what is your accent?
It's from the former Soviet Union. I emigrated, my family emigrated from the Republic of Moldova when I was 10. And so they took me along with them, naturally. So
you've been in the...
just before the Soviet collapse.
Wow.
Moldova used to be one of the former Soviet republics. It was occupied by the Soviet Union in 1945.
Right.
And so that was the republic. It's just southwest of Ukraine.
No kidding. Wow.
So did your parents see something coming, or what was the what was the impetus?
The Soviet Union was breaking up, and it was 1991, and so it was a very unstable situation. And they're like, "Well, we have relatives in the United States, and why should we stay here when things are getting pretty unstable?
Yeah.
Let's get going."
So where did you eventually immigrate to? Did you come to Columbus?
I went to New York, New York City, in Brooklyn, southern Brooklyn. So I grew up there when I was 10, and that's where we immigrated, settled down. I went to New York University for my bachelor's, then went to Boston for a couple of years, to Harvard for a master's, then went to UNC Chapel Hill for my history degree, so the history of behavioral studies, and then went to Boston for the job at Ohio State.
That's great. That's great. Wow, those are very
That's some good creds.
highly regarded universities. That's super. Well, good to have you.
Well, just a little introduction here for us. I have a master's in theological studies from Vanderbilt Divinity, but I'm an atheist. But I was an evangelical minister for the first 39 years of my life, and then I lost my faith. And the show was started because the deconstruction process, especially if somebody's really devout and it's been inbred almost into their brain as a child that this is what the meaning of the universe is, God and all of that.
Yeah, right.
And so when God goes away, the bottom falls out of your life, and it's very lonely, very painful, very scary.
Sure.
And so all our listeners primarily are people that are either in the process of deconverting or have already deconverted, and they may live in the South or something to where they may not even be able to tell their own spouse what's gone on because it could jeopardize their marriage or, friendships. I've had friends that won't speak to me anymore, because of that.
Sure.
So, and then Bob, on the other hand, is a PhD in mass communications and he's a retired professor and lifelong atheist. He was raised Catholic, but it never set in.
Yeah, it didn't stick.
And so we like the perspective of Bob because he's always just in awe of the complexity and the mental gymnastics that theists have to go through in order to make sense of things. And
it's crazy.
The cognitive dissonance, et cetera.
It's amazing. And you, as a Russian Jew, then, do you have a deconversion story? Do you still follow the religion?
I don't follow the religion. It was more of a cultural Judaism. So in my context, I grew up in the former Soviet Union when it wasn't so much of a thing to be a Jewish, or at least publicly Jewish. When we came to the United States, my parents, especially my father, tried to get me to be more Jewish. And
I don't know what that means. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, but probably more. Engage more in everything.
Yeah, so I went to yeshiva, which is Jewish school, for a while, and went to a Jewish club, kind of for young people, and was part of those activities. So that was part of my cultural surroundings. Yeah, but it never felt very comfortable for me because there's always the sort of questions, well, why do you do this? Why are we doing this? This doesn't seem to make sense. How is this connected to my actual life? So that it didn't really stick in a deep way. And so by the time I was more of an autonomous adult, when I was going through college, I went to a Secular Student Alliance affiliate, actually. So I joined that in NYU, which is the Atheists, Agnostics, and Freethinkers Club there, which is still going, and I'm happy about that. I eventually became the president of the club, and so
Excellent.
I helped run the club, and I was happy about that.
So how old are you now?
36.
Okay. So you've been an activist for a long time, and
Yes. Yeah.
you reached out to me because you have an organization that's called Post-Truth Pledge, or you're working...
It's a project. So we have an organization called Intentional Insights. Intentional Insights is a 501c3 nonprofit.
Let me say that. Intentional Insights?
Intentional Insights.
Okay.
That's right. So it's a 501c3 nonprofit, and it promotes behavioral strategies, behavioral science insights for everyday life. We collaborate with a number of reason-oriented organizations, including the Secular Student Alliance, the AHA, the AI, all the jargon.
EIEIO, I understand.
All that stuff. Yes.
Right.
But we also talk with religious folks, and we have some religious folks in the team, although most people are secular. Now, the organization focuses on using effective communication strategies to reach out to people and convey the behavioral science strategies on how to live a better life, how to avoid disasters in all areas of their life, but especially politics. So about 3/4 of our activities orient toward politics. And what we want to do, we've been focusing, the Pro-Truth Pledge is our current biggest project. It uses behavioral science insights in order to shift the dynamics for ordinary citizens, but especially public figures, to reward them for telling the truth and punish them for telling lies.
That's
What
right.
a great idea.
I like the word punish there. We'll have to figure out how to punish.
Well, you know, kick them out of office. I'm sure
There you go.
that's part of it. Yeah.
Well, just accountability.
Yeah.
But Gleb, I noticed that, and I mentioned it in a few episodes back, that the Oxford Dictionary word of the year for 2016 was post-truth.
Right.
Yep.
And
that's right.
it's a phenomenon right now.
Yes, it is a phenomenon.
Now, one of the ways that I approached it in that particular monologue was how the religious brain or the theistic brain is wired, and the neural pathways are habitually set to compartmentalize things that maybe the user, if you will, or the owner, the actor, knows is not necessarily true, and yet for whatever purpose they need for it to be true, or they need to cling to it. And so there's things going on in the brain here that I think, and I'm not a neuroscientist, but I think that I personally believe that the Trump presidency is existential, because it exists because of the way American brains have been shaped by this type of religious thinking that allows non-truths to be treated as truths.
There is definitely an aspect to that, to people willing to buy bullshit and being pretty comfortable with buying it.
Yeah.
But it's not all, that's not the whole picture.
No.
In order to determine whether it's the whole picture, we can look at other countries and what's happening there. The other reason why Oxford Dictionary selected post-truth politics, so one reason was Trump's election, the other reason was Brexit.
Right.
Brexit,
And Brexit happened in a much more secular country than the United States, but it still happened, although the post-truth stuff there wasn't as bad as with Trump, it still happened. Now, you also have post-truth stuff happened in Russia when Vladimir Putin took the country from a relatively democratic country in the mid-1990s, freedom of democracy, freedom of speech, to one that's super, pretty authoritarian right now.
Yeah.
You don't have media freedom, you don't have freedom of speech there right now. And Russia is a much more secular country than the United States. So there are other dynamics that are going on. So this is kind of, from a research perspective, I've been researching this topic. Yeah, I'm writing a book called The Alternative to Alternative Facts, Fighting Post-Truth Politics with Behavioral Science. And I'm looking at all of these case studies. I'm using Trump as a main case study, but I'm looking at other case studies, such as Russia, such as Britain, and what's happening there are other dynamics that are going on. One of the main dynamics is the social media is becoming much more powerful source of news for people, and they're trusting social media as opposed to traditional media, and that's a huge problem because social media is unverified, and Breitbart and so on. That's not holding things to the traditional standards of journalists, and that's a huge problem.
So one of the things going on here with this pro-truth pledge is that someone who buys into this is going to pledge to share the truth. And there's some points here. Balance, and I will share true information even if it does not support my opinion. Number 2, sacrifice. I will not share falsehoods even in service to a cause I believe is good. Verify. Before I share information, I will make a reasonable effort to ensure it is true. For instance, by using reliable fact-checking websites or evaluating the scientific consensus on the topic. Source. I will share my sources, providing a way for others to verify my information. And then clarify, I will express myself in ways that clearly distinguishes between what is my opinion and what are the facts.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable.
That's so healthy.
Yeah, healthy and reasonable. What's wrong with that?
What comes to mind when I read that third one was fact-checking websites. And now it's to a point where there could be a fact-checking website out there that is in itself
a lie.
A lie.
Right.
What the fuck do you do then?
I don't know. That's why it's incredible. That's why the pledge has reliable fact-checking websites, not random fact-checking websites. And if you look at the frequently asked questions, the why do we need a pledge section, and there's a section there that said what is considered misinformation.
Yeah.
The 4th paragraph down talks about fact-checking websites. Rather than going through the process of vetting fact-checking websites, we have decided to outsource that work to Facebook. And Facebook is partnering with websites it has vetted and evaluated as credible. And these include things like Snopes, PolitiFact, ABC News, and factcheck.org.
Okay, so what those four that you just listed, are those good or bad?
Yes, good.
Okay.
So these are the ones that Facebook has vetted. Now, Facebook has much more resources than we do.
Yeah.
Right.
And than any of us does. So, and it has a huge financial vested interest in keeping its newsfeed free of fake news, because, people are really upset. I mean, you probably saw the headline today where there was a murder that was videotaped and posted live on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
And that was the headline for CNN and New York Times and everything.
Sure, and they called it the Facebook killer. That's how they,
And they left it up for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That's very bad press for Facebook. Facebook has strong financial incentives to make sure that the websites it works with are super reputable and credible.
Right.
So we decided to just consider fact-checking websites reliable if Facebook works with them, because Facebook has clear financial motivations and resources to make sure those are good websites. That's why we are doing those. Snopes, PolitiFact, factcheck.org, and ABC News.
Okay. Well, what about because we've kind of moved away from this command and control kind of media, where the media would go, "I've got the news, you don't have the news, shut up." Now you can argue with the media. You could say, "No, you're full of it, and I'll tell you why." Those kind of things. Well, is it still wise for for a guy like it's a normal guy to go to the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, ABC, CBS, CNN, all the major news sources, and consider them the gold standard?
Reliable.
Yeah, reliable. Right.
Yeah, so they are much more likely to be reliable than a random source elsewhere.
Right.
That doesn't mean that other sources are not, but it's all about probabilistic evaluation.
Now, what was that? What kind of evaluation?
Probabilistic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, probabilistic evaluation. So those newspapers have a strong reputation to maintain. If they're found to be wrong, they suffer greatly in their reputation. The editors hold journalists to a high fact-checking standard. There are a whole bunch of people who fact-check stories before those stories go out. And they print letters to the editor quite frequently that where people disagree with them and so on. They print retractions if they got something wrong. That's, happens a number of times.
Yeah. So stick with the newspapers of record pretty much, and and do a triple check on them if you want, to make sure.
Right. So you can trust that those stories that come from there are much more likely to be accurate than newspapers that are not of record, whether they're left-leaning ones such as Huffington Post or right-leaning ones such as Breitbart.
Right.
So how much, Gleb, have you done on the psychology or maybe even like the personal, emotional health of people in that an insecure person who, for whatever reason, is self-loathing or whatever, insecure.
Yeah.
There is a super strong drive to not only be right, but to be on the right team and to be a part of the right, of the correct. And I'm just thinking that one of the things that drives people to maybe even violate the things that I just listed on this pledge, as far as I will share truth, even if it's contradictory to what I want. And it is so powerful to the human psyche to surround yourself with, bias confirmation, to reinforce the echo chamber, it's almost like a back rub to get to be around people that are like-minded or whatever. And it takes a lot of confidence, maybe integrity, to say I was wrong and to admit that.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I mean, it's not an easy thing at all. And here's why. So this has clear evolutionary reasons.
Okay.
We have all been brought up in a tribal environment. And it feels very challenging to go against our tribe because our emotions and intuitions tell us to go along with our tribe.
Yeah, even our loyalties.
even our loyalties, right? So to go into a little bit into the psychology of this, research shows that there are two systems of thinking that humans have. One is what is called the system one, or the autopilot system. The autopilot system is what the subconscious used to be, but research shows we can actually engage with it. So it's not subconscious. We can actually engage with this autopilot system. It refers to our emotions and intuitions. That's what we want to do. That's what feels comfortable to us.
Right.
It turns on in milliseconds. It's the much older system. It's the much larger system. It's the one that was there to save us in the savannah environment from the saber-toothed tiger,
right,
or fight when there are invading tribes attacking us.
Mm-hmm.
That's the flight or fight response.
Right.
The other system, the much more recent one, much weaker. It evolved in humans in order to help us survive in social situations, cooperate, live in tribes. And that's the intentional system, or system two. The intentional system, it takes a second to turn on. So a few hundred times slower than the emotional intuitive system. It doesn't feel comfortable to do it. This system doesn't have the comfort feeling, the intuitive gut reaction of the autopilot system. And so this is the system that we have to use, much weaker, much smaller system, to deal with social situations in a healthy way. So our emotions and intuitions tell us that we can't go against tribal loyalty, that we need to do whatever our tribe says. So in order to go against our tribe, it feels very uncomfortable to say I'm wrong, because you're opening yourself up, you're being vulnerable, and you're putting yourself up to attack. So it's very, very deep in our brains to not say that we're wrong.
Isn't that interesting?
Because we feel like we are betraying our tribe. It feels like it. That's what our gut says. And it feels like we are opening up ourselves to our enemy. That is a very challenging thing to do. It's not easy. So this is why we have to create these things like the Pro-Truth Pledge at protruthpledge.org to create a sort of a new tribe of people, a tribe of people who hold this as their covenant. The truth as their covenant. Cass came from a religious background. He knows the concept of covenant.
Yeah, for sure.
It's very viscerally.
Yeah, it's a new contract. Yes, I get it.
Yeah, it's a contract.
So it's a covenant where we have to create a new tribal sensibility where we cultivate a taste for admitting we're wrong, and where other people, one part of the Pro-Truth Pledge, at the very bottom of the Pro-Truth Pledge, it says, celebrate updating. I will gladly celebrate those who retract incorrect statements and update their beliefs toward the truth. That way, you go against the natural intuitions to not tell someone that you're wrong, but instead you positively reinforce someone who says that they're wrong and updates their beliefs, and you create a new tribal sensibility, a new tribe, where we can all come together around celebrating and being happy admitting that we're wrong.
Yeah. Well, you're really talking the moral and ethical high road here, because the same insecurity that would drive somebody to want to be right could affect the person who turns out to be right, to rub it in the face of the person who was wrong and say, I told you so. And this is asking us to celebrate those who retract incorrect statements and not rub it in their face, or even go down that lower path. I want to emphasize a couple of the adjectives that you used, with the system one being basically the lizard brain, the autopilot, and the automatic, and the adjective was strong, and that is, this thing will take over easily and quickly, and you don't even have to. There's hardly any volition involved with the fight or flight response. It's very quick and easy and powerful. System two, he used the word weak, and I think of it's not going to be as accessible as the system one, and it might take a little more effort, I think, maybe on our part to access it.
It really does. So research shows that system one, the autopilot system, it doesn't take energy, it doesn't take mental effort. System two takes a lot of mental effort. I mean, you can see this in everyday life. So, for example, let's say you're talking with your boss, and your boss is giving you your annual performance review, and he's criticizing you for, whatever. Now, for some people who are more aggressive, their automatic response would be to, want to punch their boss in the face.
Yes.
And for some people who are more defensive, their automatic response would be to stick their fingers in their ears and say, la, 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 I can't hear you.
Right.
That's the flight response. Now, the intentional response is to actually use your boss's constructive criticism to improve your performance in the future. Now, it takes a lot of effort to avoid punching your boss in the face and avoid sticking your fingers in your ears, metaphorically or really, and actually take this constructive criticism and apply it to daily life.
Wow.
So it's not easy.
No.
Just as it's not easy to not take advantage of someone who says, "Oh, I was wrong, sorry," and say, "Ha, I told you so, sucker."
Right.
Yeah, exactly. What you're asking is you're asking people to be people of good character, people of good, a good human being that sees the other
and takes the high road.
Yeah, takes the high road, exactly. And boy, that good luck to you on the politics. I wonder if that's even possible.
And ironically, on the religion. And this is one of the reasons why I left the religion, because the people who claim to have the moral high ground have lost it in this very field. A couple of names come to mind that I want to run by you, Gleb. People that have influenced me. Have you ever heard of Marshall Rosenberg and nonviolent communication?
Oh, absolutely, yes. A part of the context involves the pledges celebrating, updating.
Yeah. Talks
a little bit about that, takes some content from the Marshall Rosenberg's work on nonviolent communication.
Yeah, what made me think of it is your reference to wanting to punch your boss in the face. And we really are talking about two people sitting down with a conflict or with a disagreement, and there's all kinds of tools of listening and giving feedback and repeating back and feeling heard and helping the other feel heard and making sure that you've clearly understood what they said. These are all tools, but they are not as easily accessible than the autopilot of just flying by the seat of your pants and saying the first thing that comes to your mind. You really have to exercise some discipline there.
Totally.
The second name that comes to mind, Gleb, is Brene Brown and the vulnerability.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, that's I've never thought of it in the political, spectrum, but it really...
I don't know her. Tell me about her.
Well, vulnerability, I don't know. I've watched a lot of YouTubes and TED Talks by her. I think my wife has read her book. We went and saw her speak at Vanderbilt last year.
So her work talks about the importance of being vulnerable and open and lowering your defensive walls. And in order to establish good relationships with people and in order to have good collaboration and build bridges. So this pledge is informed in some aspects by the vulnerability. So, for example, the sacrifice. I will strive to avoid sharing misinformation, even in service to a cause I believe is good. And another one is defend. I will endeavor to defend others when they come under attack for sharing the truth, even if we have different values.
Sure.
So you open yourself up. You are vulnerable to attacks from people who share your values by defending others who don't share your values.
It seems like you have to start in grade school or something. I'm really serious.
Well, it'd be nice, but we don't have that luxury right now.
But I mean, to start building the character of a person, to be able to do this.
Don't get me started. My wife is an elementary school teacher, and she wishes that we would incorporate empathy, meditation, mindfulness. There's so much that
just an understanding of civics in general, and the fact that you're not the only person in the room here.
Yeah, we have some John Donne poetry, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
It would be nice to have that, and this is part of our long-term plans for the Pro-Truth Pledge project, is to incorporate civics into the civics program. But when we analyzed the political situation, what we realized after consulting with a number of people was that unless you get adults to buy into this, they will not have their children learn this. It will not be part of the school curriculum. So you need to start with adults. You don't put the cart before the horse. You need to get enough adults to buy into this to get this integrated into the curriculum, and then
and they see value in it, and then it becomes part of the curriculum. I get it.
Yeah, well, and they hold the power. I mean, like they're going to influence culture. They got to put their oxygen mask on first. But
exactly. And this is kind of why we have the pro-truth pledge, and why it has accountability mechanisms. So why it has punishment mechanisms and reward mechanisms for everyone, but especially public figures who take it. Research shows that we actually can change people's behavior. In part, we're informed by the environmental movement of the 1970s. Before that, we didn't think of clean air and water as a valuable resource.
Right.
It wasn't a thing. But the environmental movement in the 1970s came along and said, hey, isn't it nice to breathe and swim outside?
Or drink.
Have a nice glass of water, yeah.
That's a nice thing to do. And look at all these polluters who are not allowing us to do that. So what they basically did from if you want to take it a little bit more academic, what they did was they were solving a situation called a tragedy of the commons. So a tragedy of the commons is a very typical situation. We see many of them around us, where basically we all share a common resource, but some people get more benefits from taking advantage of the common resource and taking it away from others. So polluters get benefits from destroying the common resource of clean air and water. And politicians who lie, and other figures who lie, journalists and so on, get benefits, and religious leaders, from destroying the trust in our society.
Oh, yeah.
And trust is a very valuable resource, and it's being destroyed by people who lie, by people who undermine it, just like polluters destroyed, clean air and water. Now, the environmental movement came along, and it found a number of ways of addressing this tragedy of the commons. It did so, first of all, by raising awareness of this as an issue. And then it changed people's behavior. So it changed adults' behavior. It didn't go to kids first. It went to adults and said, hey, adults, let's do, you are concerned about this problem. This is a big problem. Let's start recycling. Let's start composting. Let's start pushing our legislators to pass legislation about this issue. And you know what? It succeeded. The environmental movement was quite successful. So it started with advocacy and raising awareness, then went at the same time providing people with things they can do to take steps. So, doing things like recycling and so on.
Sure.
The pro-truth pledge is the same thing. To address the pollution of truth in politics, you raise awareness. You then give people specific steps they can take. Just go to protruthpledge.org and take the pledge and be an advocate for it. Change people's behaviors through that.
When you're talking about the air and the environment and what have you, I mean, these are very material kind of things. Here we're talking about the immaterial, more the cosmological, I don't know,
intangibles.
More intangible things like truth and and whatever. I mean, truth seems to come with its own, I don't know, baggage of political and social and economic. Everybody's got truth now,
Well, let's just say it, Bob, so everybody can take a drink. It's nuanced.
Yeah. It is nuanced. And we have people that are science deniers as well, that think that really don't have a clue about how science works. And you as a person that is involved, and me too, I mean, for years and years, I hung out with people that, I mean, just dedicate their lives to finding the truth. And, and we get using the methodologies of science, we get as close. Maybe we're not there, but we get 99.9. We get we get as close to the truth as you can get, given the way we are.
The nature of reality.
Yeah, and yet people push away from that, and we have a whole history of people just not being anti-intellectual for some reason in this country. I don't know why that is. Maybe because of the democratic ethos.
It's a difficult thing, and this is one of the reasons why the pledge describes the scientific consensus besides the fact-checking websites. The other thing that we can use is a scientific consensus.
Right.
So a person who's a climate change denier can't sign the pledge because that goes against the scientific consensus. Or the one who says that homosexual conversion therapy works can't sign the pledge because that goes against the scientific consensus.
Right.
So people who go against the scientific consensus would not be signing the pledge, or flat earthers or something like that.
Sure, flat earthers. Yeah.
So the pledge is meant to, in part, to encourage and support science as the best way we as human beings have to discover the truth. Now, I don't think we need to discover the truth like, 99.9%, whatever, 99%. The beauty of science, what I love about science, is that it constantly improves itself.
Right.
It corrects itself. Then, new discoveries show that old methods were, in some cases, wrong, and that's wonderful. Then we can update more. As more evidence goes toward the truth, then we can update and celebrate updating, right?
Yeah.
So this is a perfect pledge for scientists. It kind of describes the scientific process in its ideal form.
I want a T-shirt that says "Celebrate Updates."
There you go.
Yeah, go for that. That's a good idea.
There you go.
I'm gonna come back. I've got to finish these three people that came to mind, and I just was curious if you had been informed or influenced at all by Jonathan Haidt.
Yes, Jonathan Haidt. So his work has been really interesting. He showed that conservatives, they value things like purity. They have a very strong disgust response, emotional.
What is it?
Disgust response. Their autopilot system.
I know, but what was the word? Purity?
Purity.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
They value traditionalism and conformity, and they value safety and security.
Yep.
Whereas
sure.
liberals value fairness, equality, civil rights, and justice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing about Haidt's work is that none of those mainstream values includes truth and reason.
Okay.
That's true.
Kind of conveniently left that out.
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
No,
isn't that
I mean, he
something?
didn't leave it out. I mean, this was one of the things he tested, and he found that this is not something that people value,
it? Oh, I
mainstream
see. I
liberals
see.
or
Yeah.
mainstream conservatives. So what we want to do, what I think would be super good, is to increase the value of truth so that people don't trade off things like purity, conformism, or equality and
Yeah.
civil rights for truth. There are plenty of liberals who would say that, I will lie for the sake of social justice. Plenty of conservatives who will say, I will lie for the sake of purity.
Yeah.
know.
Or the unborn child or something.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly. So that's what we are up against. It's a difficult struggle. That's a road uphill. But I hope that people will sign up to the Pro-Truth Pledge, because this is the only thing that I think can save the United States from a further post-truth politics situation.
Okay, let's go there, because
Yeah.
I watched your video on the website, and you're on the street with a microphone and people are gathered around you. And you said something that I think, this is where I love the prophets. I love the people who kind of see the future and they call it, and everybody has at that point a choice as to what they're going to do with that information.
That's right.
But one of the things I think is valuable is that you're an international figure. I mean, like you're born and raised in the Soviet Union, and so you've got such a broader perspective than little Oklahoma boy me. There's just never been anywhere. And so I love the global perspective and the historical perspective. I think history repeats itself, or we can learn from our mistakes, or those kind of things. So this is what I'm about to repeat that you said is not coming out of the mouth of a slick-haired back radio DJ pulling shit out of his ass. This is somebody who's got a PhD, he's got studies, he's cultured. And he said, I'm referring to you in the third person, I apologize that, but you're not in the room, so it's easy to do.
No worries.
But he said, look, in 2020,
Right.
Trump is going to lose the election, and he is not going to relinquish the White House easily. So talk more about that, Gleb.
Sure. So this is it's very likely that Trump will lose the election in 2020. He has very high unpopularity ratings right now. So he is at this stage in presidency. We don't have a previous president who was as unpopular. And he has failed in a number of his promises.
Right.
So he's failed to repeal the Affordable Care Act and other things that he promised to do. So he has a great deal of lack of popularity right now. It's very likely that he, in 2020, he's still now, we can imagine a situation where he won't run. That's possible. It's quite unlikely because he's Trump. And he's also doing a lot of fundraising right now for the 2020 campaign. So it's very likely that he'll run. If he runs, it's very likely that he will lose. If he loses, now the question is, will he give up power? We already saw in 2016, in October 2016, when it looked like Trump would lose, he was already saying that, oh, this election is rigged against me, there will be massive voter fraud and so on. Once he won the Electoral College vote, he kept saying that he won the popular vote. And what does the actual evidence show? Hillary won the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes.
Right.
Now, that doesn't matter for who is president, but it matters for Trump's ego. And it also matters for his mandate. So that matters. He keeps doubling down, tripling down, quadrupling down on that lie. He keeps repeating it, even though very many people have called him out for it. Now,
even Republicans.
Even Republicans, yes. Paul Ryan has called him out on it. John McCain has called him out on it. Senator Mitch McConnell has called him out on it. And Mitch McConnell usually does not call Trump out for anything.
He doesn't. Yeah. He has no soul, so I don't know how he would do that.
Yeah. So, apparently he has, a tiny soul somewhere.
Okay. We'll give him credit.
I appreciate him for doing so, even though I disagree with him in the large majority of cases.
Sure.
Now, another couple of things I want to mention. Trump, chose as his attorney general someone whose one of his best-known accomplishments is suppressing minority African-American voters and perpetrating the myth of widespread voter fraud. And Trump's base believes him. Very unfortunately, most Republicans, according to polls, believe that Trump won the popular vote.
No way.
Really?
Yeah, totally. Over half Republicans, according to a Qualtrics poll in December 2016, over half of Republicans believe that Trump won the popular vote. That is what they believe. Now, that is super unfortunate. What will happen in 2020 if Trump, which is very likely, loses the popular vote? I have a very high probabilistic estimate that he will not go quietly. He will claim that the vote was rigged. He will try to get his Justice Department to find evidence of voter fraud. He already is launching an investigation of voter fraud in the 2016 election in a committee headed by Mike Pence. So he already launched into the non-existent voter fraud. Yeah. Now, he can very well have his committee trump up some fake stuff. And what will happen? He may very well stay in power. It will be a constitutional crisis. But if enough of his supporters believe him and come out on the streets and support him, he may very well get enough delegates to swing his way, and he would win power. And that's how we would see the ending of democracy in the United States, because in 2024, he'd use the same tactics to hand over power to a chosen successor.
Yeah. Well, I'm reminded of Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
In 2011, his life unraveled before everyone as far as prostitutes and drug addiction. He lost the television show he got or whatever.
Sure.
And in an interview, he said, winning,
right.
And it reminds me of Trump, that it's like, he just continues to think he's winning.
Yeah. Well, but I'd like to think we're not in like South American politics, juntas happen and what have you, and, leaders are overthrown. But usually the leaders control the military. It's so difficult for...
What, you having trouble believing that Trump would
No, I agree with Gleb. I think he'll do some crazy-ass shit like that.
To try to stay in office.
Yeah, to stay in office. Yeah, but...
Well, let's talk about history there, because, historically, this is how empires fall. And they have many, many times. So it's not like it's unprecedented. It's actually textbook.
Yeah.
It is very textbook. And this is one of the reasons I'm really worried about American democracy, because Americans tend to have a lack of historical imagination and appreciation for the historical perspective.
I would call it education, not imagination.
Yes. I want to be a little bit generous toward Americans.
Thank you.
So, not myself having been a native-born American, don't want to sound native-born Americans.
Yeah.
So people don't have the education, like you said, to appreciate that huge major countries in the past have fallen to dictators, democratic countries. We have examples of Italy. We have examples of Germany. We have examples of Spain. We have examples of Russia. Russia just right now in the 1990s went from being a quite openly democratic country to an authoritarian country run by Vladimir Putin. Now, what did Putin do to do so? I mean, he came to power. Russia had a freedom of speech, had a free media that was criticizing government. He came to power. He started by attacking the media.
Well, but he was elected.
Yes, he was elected. Absolutely.
But there came a time when his term was up. I don't know this stuff because I'm an American, but there came a time when his term was up and he figured out a way to stay in office.
Right.
Well, he had a puppet.
What he did is he started off by attacking the media, criticizing the media, and then having the media physically assaulted, including killed.
Yeah.
Now, then over time, he gradually had the state apparatus take over media channels through various financial pressure mechanisms.
Yeah.
So he used, put fines on the media that would criticize the government. Some of the stuff that Donald Trump suggested he might do through libel laws.
Right.
And so eventually he took over the media and he started messing with the election process. Mm-hmm. So having stuffed ballots and so on. Now, what he ended up doing was taking power. He served 2 terms. He passed power to his chosen successor, Medvedev, in 2008 after serving 2 terms. And then because he, according to the Constitution, you can't serve more than 2 terms at a time. Now, after Medvedev served the term, he turned power back over to Putin in 2012.
Right.
So Putin was able to take power, and that wasn't a problem because,
And he did it all legally, too.
Yes, it was all legal. Mm-hmm. So, well, except the killing of journalists. But,
Yeah. So I imagine you have an appreciation for George Orwell.
Yes. I mean, Orwell describes a scenario which is kind of, dystopian, but I prefer to focus on the real. And Trump shows a lot of signs of having fondness for Putin and his methods. Mm-hmm. He has called Putin one of his most admired leaders. Mm-hmm. And he obviously has a lot of he was saying really good things about Putin. He's attacking the media. He's attacking the election process. This is Trump attacking the media, attacking the election process. There's a very clear path that Putin followed that there's no reason that Trump can't follow. We see the same path being taken in Turkey right now, another major country, which has just passed a referendum to give the president sweeping powers.
That's right.
So
That's right.
The president of Turkey, about 6 months ago, launched essentially a very aggressive operation against opposition media figures. Mm-hmm. So this is a very worrisome trend. And the reason that this is allowed to happen is because people weren't really focused on addressing lies in politics.
Yeah.
In 2020, there would be mass demonstrations in support of Trump by his supporters, and no demonstrations by people who oppose him because they don't care so much about what the actual truth is. Then Trump gets to stay in office, and that's horrible for the future of America. The Pro-Truth Pledge is meant in, we want to really ramp it up for 2022, for 2018, but 2020 is going to be the biggie to help constrain the environment and make people more oriented toward the truth for the election so that Trump doesn't destroy American democracy and so the other politicians not destroy American democracy.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to pick your brain on this, Gleb. There is something that I see, and I don't know. It has to do with machoism, masculinity, power, bullying, the fear of weakness or appearing weak, and the likes not only of Putin, obviously, where I think maybe you can tell me more than I, but maybe some of the Russian people kind of like having a tough guy for a boss or for a king, and I think some of the appeal of Trump was that he was going to beef up this already overblown military and wasn't going to take shit off anybody, and even encourage people at his own rallies to beat up, naysayers or whatever. As historian and psychologist and all this behavioral stuff, do you see any pattern with like the appeal to machoism?
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a good article published by Riz McCool, and she talks about Trump using the psychology of pro wrestling to appeal to his audience. And
really,
this is true. So there are two types of people in wrestling, pro wrestling: the face, which is the good guy, and the heel, which is the bad guy.
Yep.
And she titled the article "Heel in Chief."
Heel in chief.
So yes, so it talks about how Trump uses the rhetoric and the psychology of pro wrestling to appeal to an audience base which are big fans of pro wrestling. I mean, lots of Republicans really like pro wrestling.
Yeah.
And he conveys the sort of entertainment value that is conveyed through the macho appeal of the pro wrestling bad guy figure.
Yeah.
He rails at the media, he rails at his opponents, and so they psychologically pattern match him to what they appreciate and admire in terms of powerful sort of counter establishment negative figures who have the heel aspect. They don't go with the flow. They kind of contradictory, and so they like that. They appreciate that. That resonates with them. So he definitely uses that. He's a very strategic person who is quite good at figuring out what motivates people and drives them, and how to get them to do what he wants.
But do you think it's that intentional that he knows what he's doing? I don't think he's that smart.
I think you underestimate his smartness if you believe that.
Okay.
We have a lot of reports about him acting behind the scenes that show him being quite a bit different behind the scenes than he is in front of the cameras. He's much more diplomatic, much softer, and he's able to finagle things and wheel and deal and so on. And the public face that he puts on is a face.
Oh my gosh, this is a game changer for me, because I have whatever grace or leeway I've given him, I've afforded to him, because I never thought it was calculated. But you're saying otherwise.
No, it's absolutely calculated. I mean, we have a lot of evidence for him behaving quite a bit differently behind the scenes. You have even people saying that. Ben Carson said it, that Trump has two faces and he acts differently behind the scenes than he does in front of people. He absolutely does. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind.
Wow. I've got chills right now, because I'm like watching a horror film in this podcast right now.
Yeah. This has been obvious to me for quite a long time, which is why I've been working on this. He knows what he's doing. I mean, if you look at what his values are and how he acted even 5 years ago. Yeah. He changed so much for the election, and the way he behaves, the way he carries himself, the things he says he believes, to optimize himself for electability and for conveying a certain persona in public that is not at all aligned with what he intuitively believes or wants to do. He's very flexible. He's very emotionally intelligent. He knows what people want, and he gives it to them in such a way as to strike, make the most powerful impact. Mm-hmm. Now, he doesn't always make the best calculations. So you can't think that, he's always right in what he does.
Right. Well, no.
He makes mistakes.
And nor is he always going to be good at what he does. And one of these, I'm hoping it backfires before this horror story comes to fruition. Yeah. Okay. Something came to mind while you were talking about the heel and the face and such, or the way his base fell in love with him, if you will. I'm intrigued with this notion of opposites attract. That one of the things that my wife and I were very opposite, but one of the things that she liked about me was that I was a risk taker and I was fearless and I was shameless, whereas she's kind of conservative and maybe lacks. So bravery, when she sees bravery, she wants it because she wants it for herself, and so vicariously maybe she can get some of it by latching on to me. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. These voters, the base for Trump. They look at him and they see traits that they don't have, but they think if they can, it's almost like people that say they're Alabama football fans, but they've never attended college anywhere.
Okay, I hear what you're saying.
They're vicariously wanting to be a part of a winning program.
Yeah, there's definitely elements of that. So people definitely want to be billionaires like Trump is. They also definitely want to be aggressive. And macho and stand up there there's a reason why conservatives who traditionally go for conformists have flocked to Trump this election season. It doesn't seem intuitive as someone who is different and who will bring them back to their traditional, make America great again, right?
Right.
So there are some elements to that. There are also some elements that don't align with this kind of. Conservatives usually like purity. He's just not someone who is pure.
Well, that's why they're good cognitive. I mean, that's why they're compartmentalizing that part.
Yeah, there's a lot of compartmentalization there.
That's true. And I want to ask about that because conservative Christians have just jumped on board. They are just 100% for Trump. And yet, how do you figure that one, Gleb?
It's really interesting to see the difference between conservative Christian leaders and conservative Christian constituents. So conservative Christian leaders have far from embraced Trump. There are many conservative Christian leaders, like ministers and so on, who are critical of Trump's behavior and Trump's ethics and values. Some who didn't even fall in line after he was elected the Republican frontrunner, who were like, no, I can't vote for this person. He's very unethical, he's unchristian, and so on. Mm-hmm. Well, but their base, their constituents, have flocked to Trump, even against the words of their leaders. I mean, some didn't because, leaders, but so most did, even against the words of their leaders. Mm-hmm. Because to those people, their ideology of Christianity matters less than other things that they value about Trump. Mm-hmm. So here's a case where Christianity, the people who tend to be Christian leaders don't like Trump that much because Trump is not very Christian. But the people, the base, they don't necessarily go to church because they're in love with Christianity. Mm-hmm. They go to church because it's part of their tribe. Yep. They want the community. They like, hanging out with other people like them, making business deals in church and so on. They like that. And it's not necessarily because they believe in Jesus super strongly. It's a much smaller part of their identity. Yeah. So this is why they have been willing to flock to Trump. This is not because of their Christianity. Right. It's more like in spite of
I was going to say in spite of it. Wow. All right. So one of the flip-flops that I've noticed, and maybe you can help me understand, when Obama was president, mm-hmm. the anti-Obama rhetoric out there was, he's a tyrant. He's King Obama, they called him. Yeah. And there's basically this, what seemed to be a great fear and distrust of authority. And yet, I'm telling you, those same motherfuckers that were saying that have literally crowned a king and paved the way for a tyrant. So what's going on there?
Oh, well, it wasn't, this is a phenomenon in psychology that's known as revealed motivations.
Revealed motivations.
Yes. So when people act in contrast to their words, we can see what actually motivates them and drives them. We can see that what actually motivated and drove what people were saying about, tyrant Obama wasn't their concern about tyranny, but was their concern about Obama. Yeah,
and racism, maybe.
Yes, a variety of motivations. Yeah, but their concern about Obama and everything that Obama represents.
So this revealed motivations is what Jesus called, "You'll know them by their fruit."
Yes, exactly. Okay. So they didn't really care about the problem of authoritarianism. Mm-hmm. They cared about Obama and everything that Obama represents. So now that Obama's gone and Trump is in place, they're like, whatever, sure, authoritarianism is cool as long as it's Trump.
Seriously, yeah, that's totally it.
That's amazing. Yes. Wow.
So we're going to put your, links to your websites on the show notes, but let's go ahead and repeat them here. We're talking about not only the Pro-Truth Pledge, which has its own website. What's the URL for that?
protruthpledge.org.
All right, easy enough. Pro just being PRO, Truth Pledge, and then this intentional?
Intentionalinsights.org.
Okay, Intentional Insights. And then lastly, before we wrap things up, I do want to, I feel like that the people who take this pledge more than anything, I mean, obviously, when somebody commits to something like this, where there's hardly any way for you to enforce it or make them accountable to it, it's more of just an awareness on the part of the person who takes the pledge. Is that right?
No, for people who are ordinary people, it is more an awareness because we're not going to be enforcing it on them. But research shows, so this is informed by psychology research, that people who take a pledge, who commit to something, are more likely to abide by it than people who don't. And so people at universities that have an academic honesty code and that ask their students to take it, the research shows that in comparable demographic universities elsewhere that don't have an honor code, there's more academic dishonesty.
You know, that makes sense.
Yes.
Just like the locks on our houses and everything, that's just to keep honest people honest. But it doesn't, right?
Yeah,
it minimizes crime, even though, right? So I think
Yes.
it's very similar.
Exactly. So it's also, the other aspect is we ask people when they take it to share it on all of their public media and so on, and that gets other people to keep them honest. It's like, oh, hey, you shared this piece of, what I think is fake news. Didn't you take that pro-truth pledge thing? So that keeps people honest. In the same way, and there's research showing that, let's say, if people make a weight loss plan and then they publicize it,
Oh, yeah. They're accountable.
yeah, other people who are on social media and so on keep them more honest.
Yeah.
So those are things that make people more likely to be honest. But we do have quite strong enforcement mechanisms for public figures.
Oh, wait, you're going to come to my house?
Yeah. So if you look at the Pro-Truth Pledge, so .org, and you look at the second FAQ, what are the punishments for breaking the pledge?
Yeah, what are they?
So for people who share misinformation, who are public figures like the two of you and I, all of us are public figures. We appear in radio
I'm a
shows.
public figure. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo!
Yeah.
Exactly. You're a public figure. So if you choose to take the pledge, you will be held accountable with an enforcement mechanism. So people who take the Pro-Truth Pledge, ordinary citizens, whatever, have an opportunity to be advocates, to help with the pledge. And one of the roles of advocates is to watch for public figures who took the pledge and see whether they might have violated the pledge. So by going against the scientific consensus, or going against its, making a bold-faced lies of some sort, or going against the full fact-checking websites. If they do so, if it's found that a public figure does so, they first go to the public figure and say, hey, did this happen? Maybe I misunderstood something. Then if the public figure doesn't retract his words, then it goes to a mediating committee. And the mediating committee evaluates whether the public figure actually violated the pledge. The public figure has opportunities to retract his words, to explain what happened, and if in the end, if it's found that the public figure did violate the pledge and is not willing to retract his words, so this is a deliberate deception. It's not a mistake. It's not a misspeaking. The public figure has had a number of chances to retract his words.
Double down.
Right, exactly. Double down. Then what we do is we issue media advisories to all media that are relevant to the public figure. For example, if it's the mayor of Columbus, we issue media advisory to all the radio stations and the TV stations and journalists in Central Ohio. Then we send an action alert to all the people who signed the Pro-Truth Pledge and signed up for action alerts and who are located in Central Ohio, to tweet and email the mayor and the radio stations and so on. We'll write letters to the editor talking about the mayor being in contempt of the pledge, violating the pledge, and so on. So this is a quite big reputational hit for the mayor. If the mayor intends to violate the pledge, he should not sign up in the first place.
Yeah.
So do you have any big public figures who have made the pledge publicly?
We have had a number of podcasters and political candidates and local political officials and radio figures who took the pledge.
But no politicians right now in service?
Oh, no. Politicians, yes. We have a number of local political officials who have taken the pledge. So, for example, Melissa Wild, who is in Pickerington, Ohio, on the town council of Pickerington, Ohio.
Okay.
So we have local level politicians who have chosen to take the pledge and we are talking to others about them taking the pledge as well. The pledge is kind of, we are just starting to do a major outreach on the pledge, going on talk shows like this. So we're starting with more people who we figure are friendly. That's why we're going, to reason-oriented podcasters first, right?
Sure.
Before going to the mainstream media to build up some momentum.
Yeah.
So if you two choose to take the pledge, you'll become more public figures. Public figures also have rewards for taking the pledge.
Yay.
So public figures have an opportunity to share about why they took the pledge and free links to their websites and other things. That gets sent out to the people who took the pledge, ordinary citizens, and that public figure gets credibility, and they're seen as much more trustworthy because there is a monitoring mechanism.
Yeah.
Than other public figures who didn't take the pledge. People are going to be much more likely to listen to your show because they know you took the pledge rather than any other show.
Well, is there like a BBB, Better Business Bureau sticker that I can put on our website that says I took the pledge, or is there some kind of way?
Yeah. Yes, so you'll put a logo of the pledge and that you took the pro-truth pledge. Yep, and then we are setting up the system within the pledge to put public figures who took the pledge on the website itself. So I have a separate section on the website. So you both put it on your website. So saying, logo and a link to the pro-truth pledge so people can read it, like what that's about. And we'll have it on the website itself.
Hooray,
so,
that's great.
Okay, I can already feel, that trash compactor scene in Star Wars?
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed the freedom of not being under FCC regulations as a podcaster. I've really enjoyed just the liberty to say whatever the hell I want.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling all of a sudden, a second ago I whooped about being a public figure, and now, here's what's interesting. This is one of the greatest examples of speaking truth to power, which I've always celebrated.
Yeah.
But what Gleb is pointing out is that I am in power.
Yeah.
You
are.
Really?
Well, it's what he's saying is that I should be accountable for what I'd say into this fucking microphone with thousands of people listening to us per week.
That's true.
All of a sudden, I'm accountable. Shit.
So this is interesting because this is what research on tragedies of the commons shows is necessary to solve tragedies of the commons. So mutual cooperation, a contract that's mutually agreed on by a majority of the people who are involved, that is what solves tragedies of the commons. And any sort of contract means that you get something and you give something up.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, you give up lies and you get the credibility and the reputation of being known as a truth speaker.
Right.
So that's what you give up.
And I think that's great. That's great. However, I could see a scenario where there's going to be some politician going, truth squads, how dare they? Do you believe in truth squads?
Yeah, speaking of George Orwell.
Like George Orwell kind of stuff. And they'll try to bend it and smush it and all sorts of things.
Oh, I would love to see Trump use the pro-truth pledge of being a truth squad. You know how many more clicks we'll get to the website?
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
Right.
You're right.
I would love to be accused of being a truth squad.
Okay.
The nice thing about the pro-truth pledge is that it's all voluntary.
Right.
No one's forcing you to take it. If you choose to take it, don't bitch about truth squads. You wanted to get a reputation as a truth taker for taking the pledge. Well, now, okay, like you are signing a contract. You are putting your name to something. Yeah. This is not a casual thing if you're a public figure. You're putting your name, you're being accountable, you're getting benefits, and you have some restraints because you're getting these benefits.
No, I agree. I think it's great. And I don't think you're going to have any trouble, Cass, because you do speak truth to power.
Well, but and actually we all have blind spots, and I kind of want the help of the community to hold me to, and then I can celebrate my own redaction and update.
Yeah.
And that sounds cool. I'm all in, man.
I'm in. Absolutely.
The punishments for breaking the pledge, in the middle of the third paragraph, it says, as part of this process, the advocate, pro-truth pledge advocate, would adopt charity mode, which means being more charitable toward the alleged violator than is one's intuition, and assuming an innocent until reasonably shown guilty perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is not a game of gotcha.
Yeah.
This is all about helping each other to be oriented toward the truth. I'm sure I will sometimes say something that is actually mistaken, that is not the fact, without any intent to deceive. It's just like, oh, this thing was not the thing that I thought it was. Well, I want people to come to me and tell me, hey, Gleb, did you know, are you sure this thing is the right thing? Maybe you meant this thing, or, what's going on? And I'd be like, oh, sure, thank you for pointing that out. Let me go and retract my words because, I took the truth pledge. Yes, I wanted to.
And I'm, it's funny, I'm doing that right now on Facebook. If I put something up that's wrong, I take it down immediately. Or I double check or triple check, making sure that everything is cool. Because I've had it with those folks that are just putting stuff up to, I don't know, make themselves feel good. And I wanted to mention one other thing. Sam Harris, in one of his, I think in one of his earlier books, he talks about
lying.
Yeah, well, no, in his earliest book.
Yeah, but I was about to ask him about the book Lying.
Oh, okay. Well, this notion that when somebody tells a lie, we usually go, you're lying. But when a religious person tells a lie or says an untruth, we go, oh, it's his religion. Oh, okay. We back off and we don't want to say anything. Sam Harris says, get out there and say, call them out on it. And I would guess that you're kind of that way too.
Yes, I would say that to the extent that the religious claim is not about is about something that can be determined in a very clear way, that would be a problem. So, for example, we have in the pro-truth pledge at the bottom of the punishments for breaking the pledge, if a pastor makes a demonstrably false claim about miracle healing, that would be off limits. That would be a violation of the pro-truth pledge if the pastor signs the pro-truth pledge. Okay. If the pastor says, there is a God in the sky, that's not something I can determine. That's not something you can determine.
Okay.
It's unverifiable, but it's still a truth claim.
Right. Yeah. It's a truth claim, but it's unverifiable. So we're not going to mess with that. We're going to say, okay, you can make any claims you want about, hidden angels behind your back, that we can't see or feel. That's not something that's about the public sphere.
Okay.
Now, if you say that, there was a miracle healing and therefore we should not have hospitals.
Yeah.
That's a claim about the public sphere that we can fact check and therefore we can, say that that's wrong.
I get that. But what if a pastor says, well, and there's a unicorn in my backyard? Now we know that there's no unicorn in his backyard, but it's the same kind of, there's how many angels dance on a pin? I don't know, 14. How's that?
Would he be in contempt of the pledge?
If he says something, we don't really deal with things like unicorns in the backyard. We deal with things that are in the public sphere. Yeah. So if he says something
that's nonsense, Bob.
Okay, I'm just trying.
If we say something, there's a unicorn in my backyard, and therefore we need to pass legislation that women can't have abortion.
Right.
Yeah, and that's something as crazy as that would happen too. That you're right. That's funny.
Then we go first of all, let's see this demonstration of the unicorn that you claim to be in your backyard, and show me a clear link between that and how women can't have abortion because. So
that's a public sphere thing.
Okay, so Bob's been pushing back. I'm going to push back on one point here.
Sure.
So, apart from public figures, just your regular layperson that takes this pledge, embedded in this pledge is, or implied, maybe even literally, is that when you're in a social circle, maybe it's around the dinner table or at a bar, and somebody says something that is not true.
Right.
If you're a taker of the pledge, then you are to correct that person. Am I right?
Right. So you are encouraged to correct that person.
Yeah.
So that's what you should strive to do.
Be careful.
Yes.
Be very careful around here.
If this is a big, drunken guy in a bar.
Or even Thanksgiving with grandma.
Yeah, even Thanksgiving with grandma, and you want to say, well, I took this pledge, but in this case, I will choose not to do this thing. That's okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, so we're talking about things that it doesn't apply to private interactions. For example, we have in the same paragraph, while the public punishments for breaking the pledge, if my wife asks me if her new dress makes her look fat, and I think it does make her look fat, I'm not going to say that.
I get you. But plus, that's out of the public sphere. It's not in the public sphere. So.
That's out of the public sphere.
Exactly.
It's not a big deal. Now, if you see Rush Limbaugh getting like drunk in a bar, and then and you know that Rush Limbaugh is a big public sphere guy, and he spews some other nonsense that's verifiably fact-checkable, and then that's something you can call out Rush Limbaugh on if you happen to sign the pledge.
All right.
I think we got it.
Yeah. No,
well, listen, I want to say thank you for coming on, for one, but just, I mean, when people get off their ass and do something about stuff, and I'm just really, you and Pussy Riot have really pushed back against power, and I'm just grateful for this work that it's happening, and then and the thing about FD or Franklin Roosevelt's quote, no, it's Theodore Roosevelt's quote, where he said it's not the critic who counts, but it's the one who's in the arena through blood, sweat, and tears that's trying to make change, and though he may fail, at least he's not up in the stands with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Yeah. So I'm not sure what this is going to accomplish, but I think that it's really well thought out, and I'm actually more surprised at how much I learned in this last hour. Oh yeah, and I'm just saying applause. That's all.
Absolutely,
Gleb. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Terrific stuff.
Thank you. Now this has been thought out by not only me. It's a team of behavioral insights. I mean, I was a leader of the team, but this has been a team of behavioral scientists who are part of Intentional Insights and who have strategically planned out how this would work and why this would work. Yeah. And how we evaluated the scientific and the science on this, and we evaluated the political environment to make sure this is a viable scenario for changing the atmosphere of deception in our country. And this is what we hope to do. Well,
put me in that room for a second. You're in a room and with a bunch of behavioral scientists. Yeah. And it starts out as a blank palette canvas. And you look at each other and you've seen enough that like there's some crazy shit going down. Sure. And you look at each other and you say, what are we going to do about it? Yeah. And this is what you came up with.
This is what we came up with. We saw that the main problem in this situation, we wanted to address post-truth politics, lies and deceptions in politics. We saw that the main problem is that there aren't enough incentives to get people to tell the truth, and there aren't enough incentives for people to not lie. And so we decided to use the power of crowdsourcing, so getting lots of ordinary people to take the pro-truth pledge in order to monitor and evaluate public figures who take the pledge, and then provide incentives for public figures to take the pledge because they'll want exposure to the audience that we build up of ordinary citizens who care about the truth. Yeah. And they want the credibility of being known by this audience as being truth-oriented. Yeah. And the punishments of being held accountable. Yeah. So this is what we came up with. That's why we need as many people to sign the pledge as possible, both public figures like yourselves and ordinary citizens like the listeners of your show.
Yeah, fantastic.
This is what we came up with. It's all based on the science of how things work. We also are working on network effects. So what we anticipate will happen is that people, ordinary citizens, will tell other people in their social network about the pro-truth pledge. Yeah. And that's how it will spread. Sure. That's the way that it will spread. It's about network effects.
Yeah, that's exponential.
It's a movement. It sounds great.
I keep thinking of questions. It's so provocative. In that room, I mean, it kind of sounds similar, and I know that you are a member of Openly Secular, but when you were in that room and you said, well, because it's kind of what they did. It's just, as far as to increase awareness and to, it's just to build momentum. Yes. Cultural momentum.
Yes. It's like the environmental movement that I was mentioning. We're using that as an example. So we were looking around for other successful efforts to solve tragedies of the commons. Yeah. And we hit upon the environmental movement as a really good model that has been quite successful, and there's a lot of studies on how it did so. Right. So we're taking some of the best methods that were available and adapting them, and the pro-truth pledge is what we came up with.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So this is Gleb Tsipursky calling from Ohio. I'm just so grateful, and I'm actually pretty wound up here. I really am. I'm like you. I started. This is 7:00. I just drove home from work, and I was literally not looking forward to this conversation. And I am an hour and a half later. I am charged, and so well done, Gleb.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was excellent. We loved having you.
It's been really great to talk, and thank you so much. I really appreciate your support.
I'm a public figure, Bob.
Yes, you are.
Because
Be
he
careful
said
what
so.
you say.
Right.
That's right.
Be careful what you say.
No, actually, don't be careful, but, keep saying what you're saying, essentially.
Okay, there's a good point. I do not want to feel straitjacketed. I don't want to feel like I'm walking on eggshells.
No.
I love the freedom to just throw it out there and then have the courage to correct and redact or update. I love that.
Update.
Celebrate updates. That's that's
sure.
a T-shirt.
Yeah, and I think, the stuff that you do, I mean, is usually based in, truth. I mean, at least in scientific truth. There's a lot of references to books and various people that, are involved in both academic and theological studies and stuff. So, yeah, I don't think there's going to be... What's nice is to have a little thing next to the name of everyone's agnostic that says, we tell the truth.
Yeah.
I think
we've
that's
taken
great.
the truth pledge.
Yeah, and we're going to do it.
Which means we're willing to put ourselves out there and hold ourselves accountable to you, the listeners, and to anybody.
Yeah.
All right, so this is part of the beauty of community.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem with any time that somebody says, don't bother me with the facts, or buries their head in the sand and cuts themselves off from any kind of feedback, then I'm sorry, as a naturalist and as a humanist, I think that humans are naturally good. I think, we're pushing back against original sin and all the bullshit of the church. But one thing that we have to admit is that left to our own devices, accountability and community is really where we stay the healthiest. That's all.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And this, by saying this out loud, I'm making a pledge to do this. I'm basically saying I'm entering into the community of honesty and feedback
Truth-telling.
and fact checking.
Yeah, as far as we know, as far as we can know what the truth is, yes. But with the understanding that when there's more evidence, you're going to come back and make a change if you have to. And what's wrong with that? That's just smart. That's
you
what
have
people
said
do.
it. You have said it on the show. Gleb said it today.
Yeah.
One things we love about science versus religions or dogmatic, any ideology that's dogmatic, is their humility to improve and to correct and to admit when they're wrong. So that's all this is. It's just it's a humble thing saying, I'm human and I'm about to open my mouth on a large platform.
Yeah.
And I do not want to use that platform to deceive.
No, I think you have too much respect for the audience, actually, don't you?
Well, hell yeah. Yeah,
I do. So
I am such a
and I
huge...
wonder how people like Rush Limbaugh does what he does, because it's all show business.
I mean, we use the term sell your soul or whatever, no conscience or whatever, but...
Okay, maybe when you make $14 million a year or something, it's much easier to just fucking say anything you want. But when you're doing it for love and for truth, it's a different thing.
That, and going back to another thing you say all the time, that is an act of disconnection.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you know you're fucking people, you're deceiving people.
Yeah.
And you don't give a fuck.
No, in fact, he is rewarded for deceiving people.
And rewarded for acting in a way that is a disconnection from his...
I mean, his advertisers pat him on the back. His general manager, if there is one, will say, "Atta way to go, Rush. Good job. Good job with that
You really
bullshit."
got people fired up
get them all. They're
hot
all,
air.
Yeah, they're all crazy now. That's great. That's exactly what we want. And, because polarization is a narrow kind of broadcasting, it's really narrow casting, and you can make a lot of money that way.
Well, when somebody inflates a product, the greatest shoe shine ever or whatever, they're embellishing. It's lying.
Yeah.
And then when you do the opposite, you use your mouth and adjectives and tools to degrade something. Well, that's the worst person to ever walk the earth or there, whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, I will say this. I stumbled onto some comments. You know, we ask people to comment on the show. It's a big deal if you're on iTunes to comment and to leave a review, to leave some stars or whatever. Yeah. It really ups your exposure somehow, and whatever platform you watch it on. Yeah. And there's this platform called Podcast Addict that had a place for comments, and you know, sometimes I get notifications that somebody's commented on YouTube or somebody's commented on Libsyn or something. But I had never got a notification from Podcast Addict, and I was out there and I found this place on our show where people could leave comments. There were 20 comments.
Really?
High praise, man. It was so fun to listen to. I'll show it to you.
Yeah.
But out of the 20, I say 20, I think that was 20, 2 of them were negative.
Okay.
And it was, hey, I love the show until you got political, and I'm done. You know, they left kind of angry, even said something about you're not agnostic. You know, as far as they wanted me to remain agnostic politically as well, and we both have we've showed our cards very unapologetically about politics, and and you know, I think historically, if there was something where the country, obviously the country needs cohesion right now too, but where I think what Gleb pointed out, maybe even, well, definitely more so than I ever imagined. I mean, I knew that we were dealing with a real problem here. I thought George W. Bush was an idiot, but he was awesome compared to this. This is let's say in the era of George W. We probably, I don't know, we might not have entered into political rhetoric with the vehemence that we have in this last few months, but because this is not shitting around, man. This is not funny.
No, I mean, because you're a patriot. You love the country, as do I.
I love the country, and George was a fuck up, you know, and so was Obama for that matter on some fronts.
Yeah, sure.
But this is different. And you know what? I'm obviously a huge fan of Mark Maron, and he used to do political radio, and he kind of set out when he started the WTF podcast to not be political. But he's come out guns a-blazing in the last few months.
Really? Against Trump, I would think.
Trump, because of these very issues. This is not just incompetence. In fact, that's what Gleb said. This is calculated.
Yeah, right.
I did not see that. I'll be honest with you.
Really?
I thought that Trump was an idiot. And he plays one on TV is all.
That's right.
That's all what Gleb's saying. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. It really is scary when you start to think of it. And this truth notion, this whole idea of not telling the truth or living in the post-truth world. Yeah. I can't abide that. I just can't.
Well, and I think what we're seeing is that the naivete, especially of Americans, which he said are at least culturally or nationally acute in their exposure. Yeah. And historically, because there is just, I think for a lot of Americans, and I'll admit that I have been one of these for sure, maybe until recently, maybe until this very podcast, I've been a little naive. It's like, oh, it can't happen here. You know, tyranny can't happen here.
Well, there's all these democratic institutions. Yeah, and you'd think maybe not.
Checks and balances, all of that.
Yeah, but I don't know.
But I think, well, and he's got a perspective that's maybe a little hypersensitive because of his Russian background. But I don't know. He laid out hell. What we got to do if we're going to be truth pledgers is we got to tip the hat to the scientists. We got to tip the hat to academia. Yeah. And I'm an armchair historian here talking and jabbering. He's legit. And, And so I'm going to err on the side of the experts, and that's.
I think you have to.
Well, that's exactly
impossible
what we're saying.
To run a country without experts. How are you going to do it?
Yeah.
You know, or for that matter, anything. If we know anything, you and me, or you know maybe a mile deep in theology. That's about where you are. But you want to talk about, I don't know, doing some brain surgery, perhaps? No. Yeah. You know what I mean? But the brain surgeon hasn't the mile deep in theology. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we all do what we do, you know, and know what we know. But we have to sort of defer to the others who are studied in this area. It just makes sense. And it's not like an elite thing, I don't think. I don't see it as that anyway.
No.
It's just, these are the people that know what's going on and are going to help us achieve whatever goal we're going for.
We got to defer to the smarties.
Well, yeah. And I guess maybe people think, oh, they're so smart, and they're just above me. But they're not. They're just people. And if they're going to act like dicks to you, then they're dicks who happen to be smart.
Yeah.
But
you got to overlook their dickishness and listen to them when they're talking about their expertise.
Yeah.
But this is the anti-intellectualism that's prevalent within religion.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Bible even says it. A man's wisdom is foolishness to God, and vice versa. I mean, like, there's this distrust of man, and then if somebody comes along and says the earth is, we're killing the earth, well, that number one, that's not possible if God doesn't will it. Number two, it might be that he wills it, and we'd be fighting against God. And so there's literally like...
don't you think of your grandkids? I mean, don't you think of, you know what I mean? I mean, these
You know how they think of them? They get them saved so they'll survive the apocalypse.
Oh, okay.
Forever.
So everything will be fine in heaven when everyone's dead.
It's all about the saving the soul to these people. I was trying to find...
Nutty to me. Anyway.
My son posted literally today on Facebook, I think, let me find it. The active truth seekers of this world are ignored, punished, and forgotten much more often than they are recognized, appreciated, and loved for their work. Why is that? Money, power, and the disconnect from the natural disorder of the universe.
Beautiful. That's a 19-year-old right there,
a little
folks.
Philosopher.
Yeah, the 19-year-old philosopher John. The words of John.
A man after my own heart.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, thanks for doing this, Bob. Coming over in the evening like this.
I loved it. It was great. We'll do another one.